Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Millie, and today I wanted to give you a tour of my food forest and do a little bit of harvesting and show you what's ripe and what's coming up. The first thing I wanted to do is start behind me with my fig trees. Now these are the fig trees on the south. The one straight behind me is a Chicago Hardy, and then I have a Desert King on this side. Now the Chicago Hardy will produce a Breba crop and a main crop. Now, a Breba crop is the crop that produces from the old wood from last year. So if it dies to the ground, you won't get a Breba crop. This year's Breba crop dried and fell off the tree because I think I forgot to water as much as I should. Desert King will only produce a Breba crop if you live in an area that does not have fig wasps. At least that's what I've heard. So we're going to show you what's happening with my Desert King, tell you a little bit about the research that I've done, and then ask for your input and see what you think. So first let's look at the Chicago Hardy and see what's ripe there. Oh, and before we harvest, I need to say I live in Utah, which is zone 6/7, and these trees were protected heavily over the winter, so they did not have any dieback, and they actually leafed out a little bit earlier than the rest of my trees because of the protection. And I'll link a video up above that shows you how I did that. So let's see what's ripe. Now I've already harvested about 20 to 30 figs off this tree, and as you can see, there still are quite a bit more. And they've been really tasty. Let's get in here and see what we can find. This right here is an immature fig. It's standing straight up and the neck is still strong. Over here we have a fig that's a little bit further along. It's starting to change color a little bit, but it's still hard and it's not tipped over. Here's another one that's almost ripe. It's changed color a little bit more, but it's still standing straight up and is not as soft as I'd like to have it. But if you look at this fig right here, it's leaning over. It's very soft. I don't see any juice coming out the bottom, but none of that has not happened with these figs. So let's pull it off the tree and see what happens. Let's get you in my shadow a little bit so maybe it'll focus. If you look at the tip right there, there's no sap coming out of the tip. Let's pull one that's not quite ripe, even though I know that's kind of like a little bit of a sacrilege. But let's pull one that's not quite ripe and see if we have any of the sap coming out the end. So here's the one that I showed you before that's still standing up. Let's see what happens here. Back in my shadow again. If you look at the tip, there is sap coming out the end, and that means that this fig is not quite ripe yet. It was a sacrifice, but I wanted to show you what it looks like. So once again, you look for figs that are leaning over like this one, and that do not have sap coming out the end after you pick it. Now we'll do a taste test on these figs at the end, but I want to show you a picture of the Chicago Hardy fig that I picked last time, where it shows the leaf and it shows it cut up. But these are really, really tasty. They have kind of a berry flavor to them. So let's look at the Desert King and talk about that a little bit. Now, as I said, the research that I've done on Desert King is the Breba crop, for some reason, will ripen without the fig wasp, but the main crops, now as I said, the Breba crop is on last year's wood, but the main crop, which comes on the new wood, needs the fig wasp to enter into the little eye of the fig right here. And otherwise it won't ripen, supposedly. But on this Desert King, now I do have to say this was a gift from a friend. It was just a cutting he took off his tree and gave to me that I was able to start last winter. The Breba crop did dry up and fall off the tree, but I have actually from the bottom here harvested quite a few little figs. They were tasty, they were ripe. I thought I had another one. Let me see if I could find it for you. So if you look down here, right here, we've got a ripe fig. There's no sap coming from the end. So this is a ripe one. It does look a little bit different than the Chicago Hardy. We'll do a taste test of this at the end of the video. Now we could jump to conclusions and say that that cannot be a desert king because it's ripening without a fig wasp, because we do not have fig wasps here in Utah. But from some of the research that I've done, there are other people who have what they say are desert king, who say that up to 10% of the fruit will ripen without the fig wasp. Now I'm not exactly sure if that is true, but we have a fig that is a little bit different than my Chicago Hardy, picked from somebody who said it was for sure a desert king, and I do have fruit. Whatever it ends up being, it is pretty good. So let's go and look at the other things that we have ready to harvest. Now this is my pawpaw. It's a Davis pawpaw. It's one of the few fruiting pawpaws here in the state of Utah, but there is actually starting to be more and more. Several other people are getting their trees to fruit. It's really, really exciting. But this tree had probably 20 fruits on it at the beginning of the year. Then we had a huge storm come through, dropped it down to 7. And I've been slowly waiting for them to fall off the tree, and we're down to 1 more. Let me show you that one. Hopefully you can see it against the sun. This is my last little pawpaw right there. Now I don't ever pull my pawpaws off the tree. Instead, I wait until they fall off. And I was hoping it would fall off by now, but it hasn't, and it's still hard, so I'm just gonna let it continue to ripen. Now pawpaws are extremely tasty, but they do need to fall off the tree before they're ripe and good to eat. They taste like banana mango custard, and I absolutely love them. So I've been really excited to have this one. I have several more that I'm trying to grow on this property. I've tried in the past to grow them. They're a little difficult to get started here in the state of Utah. But hopefully I've dialed it in, and we've got some more coming so that they can pollinate each other. Now I'd heard in the past that pawpaws did need a pollinator to get fruit, but this one has been pollinating itself since it's been producing for the last 8 years. And I'm hoping that once we have more pawpaws that we'll actually get more fruit. And as you look, it looks a little, as you can see behind me, it looks a little disheveled. This tree happens to be the one to go dormant before any of the other trees on my property. It normally has all the leaves off of it and completely dormant by the end of September. And this is the 2nd week in September, so it's definitely time for it to start losing its leaves. Now the next thing I've been harvesting is my ground cherries. We have a ton of ground cherries, and I'll link a video up above that I did about ground cherries, and they're really, really tasty. Let me show you up close what they look like when they're ripe. There are a ton of ground cherries on this plant. Just on this branch there's a ton. There's still more flowers coming on. This is a little unopened flower right here. They're really cute. And then this right here is a ripe ground cherry. They have these little papery husks over the top of them. When they fall off and turn really papery, they are ripe, and they're really, really tasty. And there's always a ton of them. So we've been harvesting those. Now this is a different kind of ground cherry. This is a Peruvian ground cherry, or goldenberry. They have the same flowers, so you can see that pretty little flower right there. They have the same papery husks that look like the tomatillos. There's several of them up here. But these do not fall off the plant when they're ripe, like the regular ground cherries. Peruvian ground cherries are usually ready to harvest near the end of September, the beginning of October. They do not fall off the bush when they're ripe. What they do is the husks will turn brown, and then you just feel the cherry and look for it to change color. But they're really, really good, and they have more of a papaya mango taste to them than the pineapple ground cherries. But they're still really, really good. I made salsa with them last year, and it was really tasty. So let's show you the next thing that we're gonna harvest. This is my Ronde de Bordeaux fig. It's gotten huge. It's approximately 6 to 7 feet tall, that tallest one. The rest of it's about 4 feet tall. And I've gotten a couple of ripe figs off of it. Let's see if I can find it again. And here's a ripe one. They're definitely a little darker than the other figs. Supposedly they were supposed to ripen earlier, but they have not done that. This is only the 3rd fig I've been able to harvest off this bush, and they're quite good. So we'll taste that when we go inside. There's my figs so far. This is an update on my Nikita's Gift persimmon. This is its 2nd year. I actually broke this branch and had to tie it back together. And this has been over a month since I've done that, so it's worked. The leaves are still alive. The persimmons still have not fallen off, and we'll see if they actually ripen. This is mid-September, and they should ripen in October, so we'll see what happens. Now I finished harvesting all my pears and I got about 20 pears off that. We've got several more ripening inside, so I'll show you a picture of those. But next is my September Wonder Fuji apples. Let me pick one of those and show you what they look like. Now I'll link it up above, but we protected about half of the apples with these little mesh bags. And let me show you an apple that outgrew its bag. Now this, we may end up needing to cut this bag to get this apple out of it, but it was protected beautifully and they're so tasty. So what I think I'm going to be doing with these apples is cutting them up and drying them, because I love, love, love dried apples with a little bit of cinnamon on it. So apple harvests are on their way. Now earlier this spring we had a really late freeze, and it happened right as my peach and nectarine trees had their blossoms opened. I mean, it was almost the day they opened that it froze. And I lost probably 90% of the harvest, which is really, really depressing. But I have gotten at least 10 to 20 fruit off of each tree, which is only about 1/10 of my normal harvest. Now we've got the last of my we have one more nectarine on the tree, I think, maybe two. And then we have my O. Henry peach tree to harvest, and I will show you what they look like. These are my last two nectarines. I generally wait until the nectarines fall off the tree to harvest them, but sometimes if they're soft, which they're not soft yet, this is going to be the first one to go. You can see the birds are starting to try it already. It's still a little bit too hard to harvest, but they were absolutely gorgeous this year. I dried a lot and ate a lot fresh. Now my early lemon Albertas are done being harvested. This is probably the fifth, I think the fifth O. Henry that I've gotten off the tree. I usually wait until they fall off. It looks pretty bad on the outside, but when you open it on the inside, they're absolutely gorgeous. And I'll show you that once we get in the house. You can see a few of them up here. So we've got a few more. I think there's more than 20 on my O. Henry tree. There might be 30, but it's definitely not my normal harvest size. And they're just about ready to fall off. We're getting a few here and there. Now that's the end of what we have ready to harvest, and I wanted to show you some things that are up and coming. As I said, it's near the end of September. We should be coming near to the end of my harvest, but I have to tell you, we have a lot left to harvest. And I planned it that way. I wanted the longest harvest season out of this food forest as possible. It starts early with the strawberries and the Juneberries, and I'll show you what is still to come. My lemon tree has lemons on them that will be ripening closer to January. So this will probably be the last thing to ripen on my property, but this will go indoors. My lemon tree will go indoors under grow lights for the winter. And we've got several new little babies starting there. We're standing across right here from my jujube tree. It is a little bit less of a harvest than I've had in previous years. It's just the middle layer that seems to have developed a lot of fruit. Usually I have fruit on the top layer, which we see hardly any, and then the middle layer, and then the lower layer. The lower layer is completely devoid of fruit also. But the jujubes will ripen near the end of October, and I'm really excited for those. These are one of my favorite fruits. Matter of fact, it's prematurely ripened, but you can see one brown one right there. That's the color they get when they're completely ripe. That one's prematurely ripened, so I'm assuming that it's not going to have a great flavor. Now another late crop are the Medlars. As you can see, this tree is absolutely loaded with fruit. Medlars are a fruit that is more commonly grown in England, but they grow beautifully here. I get a good harvest of them every year, and I'll link a video at the top that shows what I did with them. I finally was able to figure out how to harvest them, when to harvest them, and what to do with them last year, and they turned out really beautiful. Now Medlars need to go, from what I found, the Medlars need to go through a freeze to be able to blet them properly. Bletting is when you pick them while they're hard and unripe, and you let them ripen in a cool, dark place where they turn really, really soft. The flavor is kind of like an apple cinnamon, and it's very, very soft, but it has a grainy texture to it. So the grainy texture is not my favorite, but the flavor is really good. Now I can't remember if I said the Medlars are going to be harvested in November. So that is one of my last crops to be harvested. The second to the last to be harvested are going to be my Concord grapes. So I have Concord grapes here that will be made into juice. And I usually wait until a good frost before I harvest those to sweeten them up to their peak flavor. At the same time, I'll harvest my Swenson Red. The Swenson Red are ripe right now. They're pretty good. They could be a little bit sweeter, and I do like to mix these together with the Concords when I make juice. Sorry about my shadow, but there's only one fruit that I'm going to be able to harvest on this bush, and it's going to be much later. Hopefully I have time to ripen it. This is a hardy passion fruit, or Maypop. I didn't get a lot of flowers on it this year, and I think it's because I have it crowded up against this bed. I need to add better trellising so that it can have more room to flower. But when you look down here, we have one flower that's developing fruit. And I'm really, really excited about that. I haven't found fruit anywhere else on the shrub. I haven't found fruit anywhere else on this vine, but there might be some hiding, and that's what I'm hoping. So at least we're going to get one to taste. Now I've shown you all of the fruit that is yet to come, all the fruit that I'm harvesting right now. Let's move on to the taste test on these figs. Now this one right here is the Desert King. Hopefully you can see the colors on that. It's a little more caramel colored. This right here is a Chicago Hardy. It's got a darker berry color. And this is the Ronde de Bordeaux, which is the darkest by far. Let's start with the Ronde de Bordeaux. And I'll put a picture on the screen of an earlier harvest that I did where I cut all the fruit really carefully, laid it out with the leaves of the fig trees, and show you the differences of what they look like inside. And this is all their first year except for the Chicago Hardy. This is the Chicago Hardy's second year. And so I'm assuming the fruit will change as they mature, but they basically all looked the same inside. The flavor was really close. So here's the Ronde de Bordeaux. It's kind of a light color, but it's really tasty. Very, very, very sweet, very sugary, with a slight berry flavor. Now from what I've heard, figs develop better flavor as they mature. So they say do not base your judgment on the fruit's flavor on the first year, but it still is really good. Next is a Chicago Hardy. It's a little bit darker, but still just as juicy. It has kind of a raspberry flavor to it, and I think its flavor is starting to develop a little bit better because it's an older tree. Now finally, the supposed Desert King. It's definitely different than the Chicago Hardy. Looks the same inside. This one has more of a, I don't know, the word that comes to mind is Sprite. It's a sharper flavor. Not as sweet, but a little more complex than the Chicago Hardy. So it's definitely not a Chicago Hardy. And it's got a really good flavor. So it's a little bit less sweet than the others, as I said, but it still has kind of a berry flavor in a way. I definitely like it a lot. Now I'll show you the inside of my peaches. So I brought out a peach and one of my pears just so I can show you how pretty these pears are. They are really, really tasty. So I washed the peach. As you can see, we've got the yuckiness on top, but I wanted to show you that it's so much better inside than you'd think. This is an O. Henry, so it's got the freestone. It just fell right out. Then you just cut the top off. You can see how gorgeous that is. Just cut the nastiness off. And I did wash this. And I tell you, if you have not had an O. Henry peach, you need to go get one. These are the best tasting peach by far ever. Another one of my favorites is the Bartlett pears. Now I did cover these with mesh bags. The ones that I didn't cover ended up with the apple maggot inside. But look how pretty those are. And these are like heaven. Peaches, as my aunt says, are made for the gods. So thank you so much for joining me on this adventure. I would love to hear what you're harvesting this time of year and what's up and coming. And if my videos have been helpful to you, I hope you like, subscribe, share them with your friends, put some comments down below, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.